Well, greetings to the brightest audience in America. I'm here to welcome you to another series, another talk on another aspect of the Walt Brown controversy. We looked at the correspondence between Walt Brown and another organization and another scientist. And that seems they tried to do arbitration and then they backed out. The other side backed out. So they did mediation and that fell through. And then there were years and years where nothing happened. And now we have a new character entering the scene. This is going to be Pastor Kevin Lea, and I'll show you how you can find that. Let's see if we got this. We're going to have you go into, let's see, hydroplate.com, hydroplate.org. And real quickly, I'm just going to check, see if we're live streaming. And it looks like we're live streaming there. It looks like we're, let's see, live streaming here. Okay, we're good. Everything's working just as planned. So we're going to go into hydroplate.org, and then we're going to hit the hydroplate resource button, go down to hydroplate controversy, and go right up to this nifty timeline. This is such a neat tool. I wish I would have known about this before. And then we're going to scroll past the beginning stages where he tried to take care of it privately, and then they went to mediation, and that fell apart. And that was in 95. I think they did the mediation of June of 94, and then it fell apart by January of 95. The way it looks to me. And so so nothing happens until 2001. What happens here? Figure 1, figure 2. Let's take a peek. And the neat thing about this timeline is it brings you right there. And here is an article. Is AIG helping or hindering? Part 1, September 24th, 2001. Note from Pastor Kevin Lea. The following is an article written by Dr. Walt Brown, who is the author of the hydroplate theory explanation of the biblical flood of Noah. Dr. Brown sends this article to those who contact him asking why AIG and ICR have discouraged their supporters from embracing his hydroplate theory as a viable explanation of the flood. I have reproduced Dr. Brown's article below with permission. It is posted here because Dr. Brown makes reference to my face-to-face and written attempts. Documented in Is HIG Helping or Hindering? Part 2, to minimize the differences between these organizations. Okay, what are we looking at? This is going to be the copy and paste it thing, maybe. That was like reading the originals. See if we get the originals down here. I guess not. Okay, so we're going to bring it up to the top. Here we go. Bring it all the way back up to the top. Here we go. Sorry about that pilot error, but it's a lot of fun. Okay, so this is September 24th, 2001. Scientific differences between Answers in Genesis and the Center for Scientific Creation. Interesting. It's AIG now. Well, that's a new player on the field, too. That hasn't been mentioned yet. Sometimes people write or call to ask for my response to a sincere and credible person or organization that publicly disagrees with me. Instead of interacting with that third party, I try to go to the person who disagrees and let the third party observe. Doing so saves time, minimizes understanding, and helps me learn, and allows the third party to identify any error or fault. I consider Ken Ham and his organization, Answers in Genesis, AIG, both sincere and credible. Although I am aware of no biblical differences there are some scientific differences. More and more people are asking me about those differences, and Ken Ham and his organization are increasingly spreading their version of our differences in large forums where I cannot respond directly. They have never approached me to discuss these differences, but I have always sought to deal directly with them as described above. Okay, here are 3 examples. Well, you will see some common elements and may surmise what lies beneath these differences. In 1994, I received a letter from Ron Hillstad, president of Master Books, originally the marketing arm for books and videos of the Institute for Creation Research, ICR. He said he had heard good things about our book in the beginning, Compelling Evidence for Creation and the Flood, 5th edition, 1989, and he was considering adding it to their catalog. He asked for, and we sent him a review copy. Well, praise the Lord. 2 months later, Ron wrote back and said that he had asked Ken Ham to review the book. Ken recommended that Master Books not carry the book because it contained one paragraph on the moon dust argument, which Ken said had been discredited. Therefore, Ron said Master Books would not carry in the beginning. Previously, many creationists had asked for our reaction to AIG's and ICR's rejection of the moon dust argument. We always answered the inquiries as best as we could without criticizing either group. When was this? 1994. 31 years ago. This could have been front and center. Oh boy. But Ken recommended that Master Books not carry the book. I gave little thought to Ron Hillstead's rejection until shortly after the 6th edition was published in 1995, during a series of speaking engagements in Colorado Springs, then the home of Master Books. I took the 6th edition to Ron's office. I showed him the expanded section on the moon dust issue and explained in detail 3 errors Ken Ham and AIG were making, each of which invalidates their position. The 7th edition describes a 4th error. Ron seemed to understand the errors. Then I offered to telephone Ken Ham from Ron's office and discuss the matter with Ken so Ron could hear Ken's answers directly. I predicted that Ken would not even discuss the matter because he was relying on others who had made these errors. Ron said a phone call would not be necessary because he knew Ken well enough to know that what I was saying was correct. I sent this story to Ken Ham about 2 years ago. He had no comment. AIG, what's the date on this thing? 2001. Okay. So in 1999, he sent it to Ken Ham. All right. Okay, number 2. AIG has published several articles on the frozen mammoths of Siberia and Alaska, none of which addresses the many questions that have perplexed laymen and scientists alike for over a century. After each article, we receive calls and letters from people wanting our response. Again, we try to respond without criticizing AIG. One inquiry came from an astute reader of both what I have written and articles AIG has published by Michael Ord. This reader, Pastor Kevin Lea, called Michael and was surprised that he had not read what I had written. Pastor Lea sent a copy of In the Beginning to Michael. A month later, Michael was kind enough to email Pastor Lea his disagreements with me concerning the frozen mammoths. I responded to all points in writing, sent it to both men, and to clarify matters further, offered to participate in a 3-way phone call with Michael Ord and Pastor Lea. Pastor Lea set up the conference call. What surprised me during the 80-minute conversation was that I needed to say very little. Lea, who had a scientific background before becoming a pastor, tore into the false logic, poor science, and basic questions Michael had ignored. I could see that. Questions the hydroplate theory answers clearly and simply. If Michael wasn't embarrassed, he should have been. So should AIG. In September 1999, after seeing AIG's hostility towards CSC, Pastor Lea flew from Seattle to Denver simply to talk to Ken Ham. Pastor Lea wrote the following. I wanted to appeal to Ken to at least read Walt's book. I gave Ken a copy of In the Beginning. In our meeting, Ken was hostile and arrogant toward Walt personally and toward the hydroplate theory. Ken didn't provide any technical arguments and admitted that he had never read Walt's theory. I left the material with Ken and encouraged him to read it with an open mind. The following May, 2000, Ken was a guest speaker at our pastor's conference. Following his presentation, I asked Ken if he had read the materials I gave him the previous September. Ken said he had not. What was shocking to me, Ken still refused to read Walt's book, even though the hydroplate theory is the only flood theory which explains many aspects of the flood and answers the questions of where the water came from and where it went. I contacted another prominent AIG and ICR. I contacted other prominent AIG and ICR detractors of Walt's theory trying to learn their technical reasons for disagreement. Not one responded with any kind of technical argument, written or oral. What continued to shock me was that none had read the book. One detractor, Russ Humphreys of ICR, agreed to make a technical response if I would send him a free copy of the book. 6 weeks later, he told me that he still had not read the book, did not intend to, and would not make any kind of technical response since he knew the catastrophic plate tectonics was correct, and therefore the hydroplate theory had to be wrong. After years of seeing this hostility, I have concluded that the root cause of the problem is spiritual. The biblically and scientifically sound hydroplate theory should be a silver bullet in which the wicked heart of the evolution should be a silver bullet in the wicked heart of the evolution lie. As such, Satan is using the fleshly pride and empire building of some Christians to create confusion and division. Otherwise, they would at least read the book and be willing to debate its arguments. Okay, unquote. This is Walt Brown again. Pastor Lea has written an expanded version of this conversation with Ken Ham that is attached as Is AIG Helping or Hindering Part 2. Others have told me similar comments they have heard from Ken Ham. Note from Pastor Kevin. I encourage the reader to go to this Part 2 before reading the rest of this article by Dr. Walt Brown. Okay, let's go to Part 2, shall we? I hope it's down here. Okay, go to Part 2. Okay. Oh boy, what's here? Part 1. Oh, I wish I'd have been reading that. Let's see if there's a Part 2 on this one. We might have to exit out of here. Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go to Part 2. We'll show you how to do that again. We're going to go make a new thing. This is at hydroplate.org. You know the routine, hydroplate resources, down to hydroplate controversy, up to the hydroplate timeline on the top. Okay, and then we're going to go through this bottleneck of activity, and we're going to go up here, and hopefully Flood 2 is right here. Okay, he wants us to read this first. Flood 2. Okay, date Monday, September 24th, 2001. Helping or hindering Part 1. Okay. Note from Pastor Lea. The following is an article by Dr. Walt Brown, who is the author of the hydroplate theory explanation. Okay, Part 2, helping or hindering. Let's take a look at that. That's what we're shooting for. Oh, boy, goodness, what happened here? Oh, boy, oh, boy, oh, boy. Page not found. Oh, I guess we can't do Part 2, apparently. Oh, that's unfortunate. So, page not found. Oh, we can't do anything about that now, can we? All right, let's back it up. Maybe it's at the bottom of this one. Or maybe that's what this is. Walt Brown. This is Part 1 or Part 2. Okay, this is Part 1. Sorry about the delay. You can go get a drink of water, stretch out your back, do some push-ups, whatever. Okay, so I don't know if we're going to get to Part 2. Okay. Maybe this is Part 2? Maybe it is. This might be Part 2. Oh, no, that's not it. Sorry about that. Goose chase. We're going back. Going back. All right. Where are we at here? Okay, let's read this thing. I always like that better. All right, where were we at? Okay. Pastor Lea set up the phone call. Pastor Lea flew. This is what Pastor Lea said. Oh, maybe this. Can-Am is attached as helping part 2. This is what he wanted us to read. Will this page be there? Oh, part 2. This is what he wanted us to read. Version 2, August 7th of August 225. The following corresponds documents Pastor Kevin's attempt to get the Answers in Genesis ministry to stop their practice of spreading false information about Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. This correspondence between Pastor Kevin and AIG happened in late 2001 and early 2002. Until now, November 2004, Pastor Kevin has chosen not to post this correspondence on the church's website nor give it to others for distribution. He did give it to about 10 people who were interested with the understanding they would not spread it. The decision to keep this correspondence confidential until now was to prevent distracting the body of Christ over this issue and to give AIG a chance to correct their misrepresentations of Dr. Brown's work. Pastor Kevin is hoping AIG would at least cease from spreading further false statements about Dr. Brown's work. In December of 2002, AIG again misrepresented Dr. Brown's work and thus misinformed their readers by publishing in their technical journal a critique of Brown's theory, which was authored by Dr. John Baumgartner. This critique was so blatantly false and misrepresenting of Dr. Brown's theory that it cannot be excused away or hidden. Dr. Brown had written to AIG years earlier, documenting earlier misrepresentations by Dr. Baumgartner that were published by AIG, asking them to cease this practice. Soon after, AIG stopped distributing Dr. Baumgartner's false representations, but they have now returned to using Dr. Baumgartner as a source to critique Dr. Brown's work and have done so without making a single attempt to ensure accuracy. If the editor of a major newspaper had the same disregard for accuracy, it might make national news, and the owner would take drastic steps to correct the wrong and restore reader confidence. When Pastor Kevin became aware of that AIG published Dr. Baumgartner in December of 2002, he decided it was time to make the following correspondence public. However, Dr. Brown told Pastor Kevin that another technical journal reader, Joe O'Connell, who was also very familiar with the facts of the hydroplate theory, had also noticed the patent disregard for accuracy and had written his own letter to AIG confronting them about their false statements. AIG refused to print his original letter, but encouraged Mr. O'Connell to write another letter limited to discussing the technical issues and without any comments that would put AIG in a bad light. Pastor Kevin waited to see if they would follow through with printing Mr. O'Connell's second letter. Sadly, AIG refused, thus refusing to correct the false statements they helped spread to the thousands who read their technical journal. Finally, as Pastor Lea continues to follow scientific discoveries on Mars and with the Stardust space probe of the Wild 2 comet, which confirm Dr. Brown's published predictions and or support the premise of the hydroplate theory, he can keep it quiet no longer. AIG, by their lack of truthfulness in the technical journal, may have wrongfully steered many away from Dr. Brown's theory, which is consistent with the Bible, answers where the water of Noah's flood came from and where it went, and why there is evidence that large amounts of salt water once flowed in a liquid state on Mars, and why scientific instruments are picking up evidence of organic life in comets. Christians must be aware of these answers in order to have answers in Genesis. Isn't it amazing that an organization with this name has for years been one of the greatest hindrances to getting these answers into the hands of those who have trusted them to do so? Getting those answers into the mainstream is more important than the distractions caused by pulling the veil off of AIG. It is assumed that the reader has read Answers in Genesis Ministry. Are they helping or hurting part 1 before coming to this part 2 file? As lead into Pastor Lea's correspondence, the following 3 letters between Dr. Brown and Dr. Wieland and AIG Australia provide the background that caused Pastor Kevin Lea to start corresponding with Dr. Wieland. Okay, so it's assumed that we read that, so we'd better go back and read that. Let's see, not this one. Okay, let's do this all over. Oh, we have to. We can't get out of here. Okay, we're going to start at the top. Hopefully we get a home page back in there. Let's see, hydroplate.org. You know the routine. Down to there, hit the time. Hit the timeline. And now off we go to the races. Off we go past the bunch of things that happened in 1994 and 95. And now we're back at this. Boom. Is AIG helping or hindering part 1? Okay. Let's see. I thought there wasn't. Oh, there it is. There we go, folks. Now we're cooking with gas. All right. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Using the fleshly pride, Pastor Lea has written an expanded version of his conversation with Pastor Ken Ham is attached is AG helping or hindering part 2. Others have told me similar comments they have heard from Ken Ham. Okay, note that we go to part 1 before reading. Okay, but we did that and they said this is assumed we read this. In the last example, Andrew Snelling had been spreading false information concerning the hydroplate theory for several years while working at AIG. Others were repeating it in various forms. The attached emails can be obtained by writing Walt Brown at walt@creationscience.com. Include my answers to Andrew. I first sent copies of this exchange to everyone I mentioned in the letter. Andrew had no response. The only response was from a person very close to AIG and ICR. He sent a letter apologizing for having publicly, sorry about this. This is just very sensitive. All right, I think we're just gonna have to, it's too far. That's gonna work. He apologized for having criticized me publicly for more than a decade. He said he had stopped doing so and had disassociated himself from Andrew Snelling's criticisms and other named individuals who were doing it. I deeply appreciate his letter and agreed with his statement that minor quibbles over particular flood and cosmology theories pale in comparison to our agreement on a young Earth, a worldwide flood, and other essentials from Scripture. We may differ on many topics, but we are brothers. Other good examples could be given. Notice the common elements: AIG accepting a few poorly researched scientific conclusions, then spreading them to a vast Christian audience for many years. People increasingly asking me about these errors and my attempt to deal with the source of these errors in front of these third parties. What these examples don't show is AIG's position hardening and AIG spreading their distorted versions of our differences through their far-reaching forums, along with some name-calling. Ken Ham often calls me as a loner. Often calls me as a loner. I frequently interact with people, including scientists, throughout the world. Many letters and phone calls arrive daily. Visitors arrive weekly. What Ken may mean is that I do not look to AIG or ICR for approval or direction. CSC, that's Walt's organization, is getting more and more inquiries about scientific differences with AIG. For several years, AIG distributed its standard version of Why I Am Misguided, can be obtained by writing Walt Brown. Until now, I have not responded. It has now reached a point where this is misleading and confusing many others, thereby diluting creation science's impact. Therefore, I am offering to explore all of these differences with Ken Ham and any he wishes to have join him in a large neutral forum. Several principles should guide our exchange. Ad hominem remarks should not be allowed. As Christians and creationists, we have much in common. We should be able to discuss our differences rationally, calmly, and based on evidence. While we may still disagree on some issues, we will both benefit from explaining our positions to a wide audience. 2, each side should be allowed the same number of words in the exchange and should presume that the audience has read what we each have already published, including at our respective websites. A neutral editor can resolve other details. 3, each side can discuss any scientific difference they have. The biggest subject by far will be the flood. AIG has promoted the catastrophic plate tectonics theory and has criticized the hydroplate theory. While I'm convinced that neither Ken Ham nor his few associates criticizing the hydroplate theory have tried to understand it, they do understand the Bible. The catastrophic plate tectonic theory contradicts the biblical description of the flood in numerous ways, while many have observed that the hydroplate theory corresponds to the Bible in every detail. For example, 2 days ago, I received the following letter from a scientist at the University of Texas. Dear Dr. Brown, I have no doubt you were inspired by the Bible in your research. Nobody can make mistakes with that book as a source. The source of inspiration for the hydroplate theory becomes clear to the reader in later chapters of your book after most of the material evidence is presented. When I came across your website and started reading the book, I couldn't stop. Eventually, I bought a few hard copies to save my eyesight and give to others to read. The rhetorical question I kept asking myself was, where did he get the idea? Once again, it looks like from the Bible. Nobody can logically undermine the evidence you presented. Okay, and the website to get the book now, it's hpt.rsr.org. Again, hpt.rsr.org, and you can get a download of it. Okay, and this is Walt Brown talking again. Some neutral party will need to moderate this exchange. 4 possibilities come to mind. There could be others. It could be a website specifically for this purpose. It could be restricted to creationists only, and or a fee could be charged. Secondly, the exchange could be attached to a series of newsletters of some creationist organization. Those exchanges could later be bundled and sold as a small book or placed at anyone's website. As a third possibility, the written exchange could precede some creation conference. Then Ken and I could have an oral exchange at the conference, and attendees could be given the more detailed written exchange. A fourth possibility would be for AIG's technical journal to devote 20 pages in each of 4 consecutive issues to the scientific differences we have as of this date. AIG and CSC would each be allowed 10 unedited pages, half of which would be devoted to comparing the hydroplate theory with the catastrophic plate tectonic theory, and half to our remaining scientific differences. To aid the reader, a neutral editor would arrange our opposing evidence and arguments as close to each other as possible. Probably the most difficult step will be getting Ken Ham to participate, but he could get others to join him if he wishes. AIG has published articles and hosted a recent conference featuring the catastrophic plate tectonic theory. AIG may not realize that the authors of that theory will not defend it publicly against someone knowledgeable. Oh my, yeah, we found that out this year, didn't we? Can be obtained. All right. Creationists are increasingly learning its flaws, publishing its deficiencies, and explaining them in local meetings. Yeah, who was it? Bob Enyart. You go into Real Science Radio, Bob Enyart, he does a video on this. Okay, the most frequent question I get concerning the hydroplate theory is, why haven't I heard about this before? Exactly, me too. Actually, more than 43 million people have seen a 5-minute animation of it, and about 100,000 people, both scientists and laymen, have heard a 2-hour presentation on it and have been able to question me at length. Perhaps another 100,000 have read about it in the beginning. In addition, the web version of the book receives more than 3 million hits a month. It has been on the internet since 1995. Responses to all have been about 99%, over 99% favorable. Creationists who are surprised they have not heard about it may have primarily looked to ICR and or AIG for their information. In 1976, after explaining the theory to ICR's Henry Morris, Duane Gish, and Harold Schlusser for most of one day, Henry Morris asked if I would write a technical monograph on the theory for ICR to publish. I declined for 2 reasons. First, my job as an Air Force colonel was very demanding, and second, there were so many aspects of the theory that had to be studied in depth. I retired at the earliest opportunity from the Air Force, 1980, so I could do this. Only then was I able to do enough intensive research and thereby gain sufficient confidence in the theory to begin disseminating it. The subject of the flood was much broader, and the event was more catastrophic than any of us had imagined. Also, my scientific training, PhD at MIT, and many technical assignments have taught me to consider all aspects of a problem and not be confined to one or a few academic disciplines. Objections AIG gives to the hydroplate theory have no scientific substance and simply show that they haven't read it. Those objections are, number 1, Walt Brown is not a geologist. Oh man, I've heard that. Number 2, creationist geologists, meaning the 2 or 3 working for ICR and AIG, have not accepted the theory. I've heard that too. Number 3, the theory is speculative. And number 4, Walt Brown is a loner. Okay. For several years, AIG has sent a standard response to people inquiring about in the beginning or the hydroplate theory. The points made without exception lacks specifics, do not reflect what I have written, or if they touch on science, are incorrect. It is unreasonable to expect the creationists to agree on every scientific detail or even the theories about the flood. Such differences are to be expected. I never try to persuade a person to agree with me unless they raise the subject or ask me for an explanation. I welcome reasoned disagreement. What concerns me are vague objections from those with large megaphones who show that they have not read what they criticize, who make ad hominem attacks, who will not deal directly with you, and who do not put their opposing views to the same scrutiny. This misleads many Christians, a serious matter. To resolve a scientific controversy requires a direct exchange on a level playing field. If anyone wants specific details on any points of scientific disagreement between AIG and CSC, they should encourage Ken Ham to accept my offer. I hear more criticism of the hydroplate theory by AIG and ICR than by all evolutionists combined. All of it behind my back and in forums where I cannot respond directly. Creationists should insist that this wasteful activity cease and we address our differences directly and forthrightly. Yes, I may be wrong. Let's see. Having an audience observe our exchange will help both of us see beyond our biases and address what the other person is saying. Earlier, I asked you to identify what lies behind those differences between AIG and CSC. Certainly, they do not involve biblical interpretation. I am also confident that scientific matters are not the root cause, although that is the visible surface issue on which we must engage in a public exchange. Does AIG, a growing donation-based organization, view itself as the rightful leader of the creation movement, the organization that should set creationist policy that clearly sees what needs to be done? If so, my actions could be viewed not as an attempt to get at the scientific truth or an event such as the flood, but as a challenge to AIG. A bedrock principle in law is that a person can face his accuser before a group of peers. This principle is indisputable for quickly getting at the truth, a need in science as well as law. It also puts an accuser on notice. He better have his facts straight. This minimizes the number of poorly researched accusations and reduces disharmony. It is imperative that we come together to lay our differences aside before others, all in the spirit of seeking the truth and helping thousands of fellow Christians and who want to see a clear contrasting of our positions on large critical scientific issues. I am ready. To Ken Ham, please don't disseminate, delay, or tell me to go publish an article somewhere. The hydroplate theory alone, 160 pages, is far too lengthy for an article. If Ken Ham refuses to participate in an exchange of scientific views, that would be unfortunate, but at minimum, the backbiting must stop. If it does not, matters could escalate. On February 10th to the 13th, 2000, Ken was a few miles from my office in Phoenix, Arizona. I tried to set up a meeting to discuss our differences. He wrote, if you wanted to personally discuss what we are doing at AIG and what is happening in the creation ministry worldwide, I'm certainly willing to try to fit it in with our busy schedule in Phoenix. It would probably have to be in between speaking engagements in a side room or somewhere. However, I really am not prepared at all to discuss a model of the flood. I then invited Ken to come to my office where we could have no interruptions. He declined. Today, I have again invited Ken to visit my office during his visit to Phoenix in 2 weeks. For now, the letter is going primarily to those who inquire or have heard about the differences between AIG and CSC. It will be sent to AIG first. Walt Brown, September 24, 2001. P.S. Ken Ham never responded to my invitation of September 24th, 2001. Wow. Okay, so AIG enters the stage here. Let's take you out of here. Let's wrap this up. Okay, we'll remove that. Okay, so that's where we're at. A Answers in Genesis has taken some shots at allegedly taken some shots at Walt Brown, and he has responded. He wants to clear it up publicly, and it is interesting. And he writes about that in one of his books. He says people of this scientific revolution should see who's unwilling to enter a scientific debate. And Walt's been willing his whole life. He even offered people $10,000 if they'd get in a written debate with him. If they had the credentials and earned a PhD, and they don't do it. And then Major Coleman, he actually added 10,000 to it, so they were offering $20,000, and the professors did not step up to the plate. And let's look at some of these comments. Oh, I like this one here. Jesus loves you. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Praise the Lord for that. Yeah, I have a poster of that. No, I've got Jesus died for you. And I bring that to the college and talk to kids about that. But that's what this is all about. We want people to get all the information. We want people to make informed decisions. And we want a theory that's making accurate predictions to be brought into the mainstream. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. And he likes the truth. And I think people should be able to think, come, let us reason together, saith the Lord. That's what we want to hear. But it doesn't happen in our government schools, museums, and media. They just pound a blind chance perspective of the past down your throat. That's the Big Bang and evolution. Can't think of anything else. But sadly, that's happening at our creation museums too when it comes to flood models. You can only think about catastrophic plate tectonics when actually the hydroplate theory explains it better. So what can we do? What can we do? This has to be a grassroots movement from the bottom up. And so I encourage people to start asking questions. What do you think of the hydroplate theory and its accurate predictions? And why isn't a theory that's making accurate predictions being discussed or even presented? And you can do this in public, in person. When you hear a creationist speak, they have Q&A. You can ask them that. You can do it at the museums, the Creation Museum, the Discovery Center, and have that. And also you can do it online. When you hear a creationist talking online, that's live, you can start chatting, asking these questions. And one of the questions I recently asked, I heard a creationist talking about how we should, treat the evolutionists with Christian love. And I asked, would you treat a Christian who supports the hydroplate theory with Christian love? Can somebody ask about this without being blackballed? So that's where we're at. So again, this is a bottom up. This was Walt Brown's letter that he would send to people who inquired about it. And now we'll move on. And I think this is where Pastor Lee is going to fully dive in. So again, thank you for the time and effort you're putting into this. I hope it's as informative to you as it is for me. And we'll be starting the next one in a few minutes. So may God bless and guide you.